given the fact that we're seeing amendments to this, I think from both sides speaks a lot of credit to the fact that the bill's extreme brevity and unfathomable harm needs improvement. During the hearing that we had on Saturday for this, the Arc of Washington, probably the biggest non-legislative proponent of this bill, in response to a question, the question being, you mentioned that we would endorse language to make transition stronger if amendment, or well, the question was asking them whether they would endorse language to make transition stronger if the amendment were offered that contain measurable outcomes, safeguards, and legislative oversight. The response to that question by the ARC was absolutely yes. The ARC themselves, the proponents of a lot of this language, absolutely believe measurable outcomes, safeguards, and legislative oversight are needed to make this bill workable. This amendment does that, Mr. Chair. I wish in a perfect world this amendment weren't necessary. In fact, I don't like the bill itself. I think that's very clear from floor speeches and from hearing speeches and exec session speeches. But if it is going to move forward, an amendment like this is necessary. And there are two amendments today. I'll speak to the other amendment when it comes up, but only one of them is a plan. The other one is just simply a redefinition of what DSHS already does. This one is the plan. And I'm going to go through it a little bit. I won't go through it in granular detail, but there are elements to any plan that are necessary. These are the sorts of things that if you were to put your own family in care, you would want to know that the people taking care of your family were able to do. The facility should not close down without readiness. The amendment requires the DSHS must prove to us that every resident has been safely placed before final closure can occur. It doesn't say that closure cannot occur. It says that before final closure happens, the DSHS must prove to us that every resident is safely placed. The plan requires individual-centered transition planning. It requires comprehensive assessments for every resident. Every resident here in these facilities, these RHCs, is complex and different. I said it before, disabilities are not a monolith. The spectrum of disabilities provided care in these RHCs is very broad. Everybody needs an individual plan. I would challenge anyone to argue against that point. The plan requires system capacity and workforce planning. There is a myth right now that there is adequate community support for these individuals. If there was adequate community support, I wouldn't have an inbox full of people saying there's no adequate community support. I imagine other members have similar inboxes on this issue. We need to know what exists in our state, not just for the general disabled population, but in depth, especially for the most critically affected, the folks that are residents at RHCs. We also need to know what the state employee transition strategy here is. You know, in a number of different communications I've received, I have seen statements over and over again about how it's the staff's proximity to people they know very well that helps them take care of these individuals that are residents at the RHCs. The look in somebody's eye, the sound that they make when they can't articulate speech in audible English is how they know that they need help or assistance. And when they transition out of these facilities, that ability to communicate is lost. That state employee transition is a critical component to ongoing care in this situation. And we need more than just a reassurance that state employees are going to be retained if funding is available. They need to be retained with nexus to the people they're caring about. We need a right to return until the RHCs are closed down. Mr. Chair, we give criminals we give them 12 months to return to DCYF after transitioning to DOC, but we don't give the disabled population in our state 6 months to return to RHCs if their community placement fails and their health is downgrading massively. They need a right to return until these facilities are proven to be ready to close down. There needs to be placement integrity. No resident should be able to be moved out of these facilities without confirmed, staffed, and funded placement. The original bill has a sword of Damocles sitting over every provision saying subject to appropriations. That's not good enough. If we are going to move people out of this, it cannot be subject to appropriations. We need to make sure a plan is solid, lock solid, and funded. We need quarterly reporting and oversight. We need DSHS to report to the legislature exactly the number of transitions and their destinations. The failed placements and reasons, because there will be failed placements. There's failed placements now. There's going to be failed placements, and if we're serious about closing these facilities, we need to be able to weather the failed placements and find new solutions for the folks as they transition back in and out. We also need to know about deaths post-transition. There is clearly a lot of disagreement about what happens to the death rate in this population post-transition of these facilities. We've seen it in other states. There's numbers. It's hard to tie things together. We heard it in conflicting testimony during the hearing on Saturday. We should absolutely know if somebody dies within a year of transition. We can figure out what the cause was and whether or not it's related to the transition, but Mr. Chair, I would argue that without having just a fundamental basis of reporting right now, it's just a lot of crosstalk. That should be part of any plan. We need post-transition outcome analysis. DSHS should contract for independent analysis that takes a look at the quality of life, the residential family and caregiver satisfaction, and they should report that back to the legislature. Just because we close these facilities down doesn't mean we can just wipe our hands and say that we're done. We need to know what is happening in this population and be able to support them adequately, especially if we're going to say community supports is going to be the way we go forward. We heard that there's a fiscal impact in this plan. Absolutely, there's a fiscal impact. You know, these are things that are not accounted for in the original bill. A plan is not accounted for in the original bill. I will argue, though, based off what I heard in the fiscal impacts, it's less than the cost of one unintended death. Less than the value of one individual life is the fiscal impact to make sure that we do this correctly. Look, I want to be crystal clear. It's only a plan that I'm proposing today. After many meetings of testimony, too many speeches from me and others, this is the only plan, though, that we've heard. It's responsible. It's not what I'd want. I don't think that we should be closing these facilities at all. But if the bill's going to move forward, Mr. Chair, why are we not including a viable plan? I urge a yes on this.